All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboys show. Full speed ahead to a big primetime matchup, of course, in week 4. A tough matchup for the Dallas Cowboys. As we all know, of course, Packers coming to town. A lot of interesting news as the Cowboys get ready for that huge matchup. But as we always like to on this channel, get things started with a little stat of the day, a little palate cleanser, if you will. Without further ado, let's do a little follow-up on a stat we brought up a couple weeks ago. And this is adjusted EPA per play leaderboard when it comes to quarterbacks in the National Football League right now through 3 weeks. EPA is expected points added. For anyone who's unfamiliar with the advanced analytics that a lot of people use, it's just focusing on how many expected points you could add on a per play basis, and of course you can add that up on every single play to see how well you're doing. And you can see here on adjusted EPA per play, Dak Prescott is first in the NFL among quarterbacks, just ahead of Sam Darnold, Jared Goff, and Lamar Jackson. Daniel Jones at number 5, surprise to a lot of people. You can see Josh Allen also in the top 10. Tyrod Taylor with the Jets, but he only played one game, kind of a small sample size there. Baker Mayfield, Jordan Love, and Drake May rounding out the top 10. And right now, I think the key takeaway here is Dak Prescott has played some pretty good football on a per-snap basis. Obviously, was good against Philly, really good against New York, pretty good against the Chicago Bears. A couple takeaways, of course, weren't his fault. The one off of Pickens' hands, and of course that interception in the end zone on 4th down. Listen, you just got to throw it up. Not perfect against the Bears. A little dink and dunk at times. I think the injury to CeeDee Lamb early in that game, I think Lamb was going to be their big play weapon against the Bears. And the moment he was out, it just basically forced them to be stuck with their game plan in terms of a lot of short throws to other players. I think with Lamb out this week, they will have an adjustment in terms of how they're going to have to generate big plays. And look, that's just what happens. Sometimes injuries on offense in the middle of the game, depending on what the game plan was, can be absolutely devastating. Because let's say they had 4 or 5 big plays that CeeDee Lamb called in their game plan. Lamb goes out. You don't have any replacement for Lamb, and there goes your big play offense. So when you look at Dak Prescott's performance over the course of the first 3 games of the regular season, he's been doing incredibly well. He's been doing incredibly efficient, and a lot of credit has to be given, of course, to Prescott. But when you look at the fact that this is a young offensive line with, obviously, you got a rookie, even though he's out for a few weeks now, and Tyler Booker playing a lot of football, of course. We got 2 second-year man, Cooper Beebe, but he's actually missed some time. He missed the Bears game and the end of the Giants game, and a second-year man in Guyton, who's had some ups and downs, even though he's trending in the right direction. 2 new running backs, a brand new wide receiver in Pickens. Look, this has been a sort of volatile structure around Dak, and he's played well. And give credit to Clayton Adams and Schottenheimer for what they've done with Prescott. So when you look at the quarterback position through 2 weeks, which is the most important position in football, it's one of the reasons you hire coaches, head coaches, and offensive coordinators and offensive staffs is to set your quarterbacks up for success. So far, the Cowboys staff, paired with Dak Prescott, has had a good amount of success on an efficiency basis per snap. All right, let's get into the news here. This is courtesy of Nick Harris at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. He said, Cowboys head coach Brian Schottenheimer said the team will try out T.J. Bass, Trevor Keegan, and Hakeem Adeniji at right guard this week in practice to make up for Tyler Booker's absence. Kind of an under-the-radar news here. Obviously, a lot of people looked and said T.J. Bass, the longtime backup over the past couple seasons, he's been the backup guard center, was the backup sliding into that position, at least on the depth chart. The fact that they're not just handing the position over to T.J. Bass to be the starter, I think is very, very interesting in the absence of the young rookie, who, of course, is going to be out for a number of weeks with a high ankle sprain. I think this is, again, a good move by Schottenheimer in terms of what he's trying to build. This is cultural fit. This is, making sure everyone understands there is no just automatic next man up. There is no just, hey, listen, the starter's out. Hey, the backup, you're right in there. It says, nope, we're going to look at a bunch of different guys. We're going to evaluate everything on a per play, per practice, per week basis, which is really good. And I think that's one of the reasons why Schottenheimer and Clayton Adams, as the offensive coordinator, have done a good job making this offense more crisp. And we haven't seen this kind of, I'll say, competitiveness, this focus and attention on meritocracy on the offensive side of the football specifically in I don't know how long, right? You didn't see this with Mike McCarthy at all. You certainly didn't see this with Jason Garrett. Obviously, when Wade Phillips was the defensive coordinator and or the head coach, running the defense, obviously it left a lot of things up to Garrett on the offense, and you didn't see it there on the offense. So it's one of those things you have to go back to, I don't know, at least the Bill Parcells era with maybe Sean Payton running the show where you saw this kind of thing, and I don't even know if you saw it then. So I love the Schottenheimer approach in terms of keeping practice and keeping the competition, keep it always lively, keep it always trying to get people, hyper-focused, not just handing positions over to people. T.J. Bass probably thought, and it wouldn't have been wrong to think so, because this is how it was under Mike McCarthy, hey, Booker goes down, I'm now playing the next 4 to 6 games or however long Booker's out as the starting right guard. And Schottenheimer's like, hey man, not so fast. We're going to take looks at to other people to see how they do. And I like that approach with how he handles things on the offense. But let's look at what's going on with the defense, because that brings a lot of attention, obviously, with how poorly they played, especially in terms of pass defense. And there's another story I kind of wanted to pair with this. And this was courtesy of Patrick Walker at Voice of the Star. He says, we've started the process. We've had those discussions. We'll see how today goes at practice. Shoddy on potential rosters/personal changes the Cowboys in week 4 versus the Packers. He said there will be some things that feel different, right? And I think it's interesting that he used the word feel there, right? He didn't say things will look different. He didn't say things will be different. He has no guarantee, right? He doesn't know. The defense could be worse. It could be a lot better. It's hard to tell. He says some things will feel different. And I think from his perspective as an offensive coach, and probably a lot of us felt this watching the games just as fans, it felt like the defense wasn't buttoned up. It feels like the offense. It feels, we don't know. We don't know the play call. We don't know, in terms of how people are executing. Are they making good mental decisions? Are they actually running the plays per the playbook and the game plan? We don't really know, but it feels like the offense is buttoned up. It doesn't feel that way on defense. And I think that's what Schottenheimer's alluding to here. And I think those are the changes we're going to see, or at least the changes that are going to be made are going to be further that goal. And I think that's one of the things, again, I like about Schottenheimer. He is a systems over goals guy. Mike McCarthy was a big goals guy, right? He's a big, hey, he talked about it. He says, we want to get to 11 wins because that gets us in the playoffs, right? The goal is just to get to 11 wins and then go on from there. Well, what happens then? Okay, you got to 11 wins and 12 wins, actually, 3 times. Then what? Well, you built a team that was really good to meet your goal, but you didn't have a system in place to carry your team deep into postseason success. With the Green Bay Packers, he had a system. It was Aaron Rodgers as an all-time great quarterback, and we're going to go on one magical Super Bowl run. But guess what? With that good team and with Aaron Rodgers, they made it to 1 Super Bowl. It speaks to me that Mike McCarthy, who's not a terrible coach by any means, he had a goal-oriented approach, and when they met whatever goals he had established, they fell apart because they didn't have a system in place to take them over the top. Don't believe me in terms of if it's a good approach or not. That's what Tom Brady famously did, right? His famous saying, what's your favorite championship? What's your favorite ring? He said, the next one. It was the system. The goal wasn't to win a championship or 4 championship. The goal was didn't even matter. It was all about implementing a system to continue to win and win and win and perform and perform and perform. And that's what Shawnee's implementing here. You go back, of course, to the fact that TJ Bass isn't handed the starter job just because there's an injury and he may be the backup on the depth chart. No, the system is in. The system's in place. When a starter goes down, we're going to look at everybody to see what the best role is for certain people to address that position. Maybe rotate guys. Who knows, right? We're going to go at it in terms of not just, hey, listen, our goal is just to maybe play the guy that makes it easier for us to get through practice this week. TJ Bass has played. He's going to be the backup and start the next 4 or 6 games, right? And look, I think TJ Bass probably will be. I'd be surprised if he didn't play a lot of football with Tyler Booker being out. But I think the important thing to understand is Schottenheimer's system that he's implementing. Now focus on the defense here with this report. He's talking about things feeling differently, right? He's not going to Eberflus. He's not going to the defensive players and says, all right, guys, here's the thing. We got to cut down on the mental mistakes. 0 mental mistakes. Okay, that's great. They could go out there and deliver 0 mental mistakes, right? Mike Zimmer last year, there were games where they didn't have very many mental mistakes, and they got absolutely trundled on defense a lot of times. They didn't have a lot of mental mistakes against the Baltimore Ravens. They got ran over. Didn't have a lot of mental mistakes against New Orleans Saints. Gave up 44 points, and that was with Parsons. That was with DeMarcus Lawrence. That was with a relatively healthy bunch, right? So you don't just focus on individual goals. You focus on the system. You sit there and say, okay, it will feel different. It will feel buttoned up. It will feel much more like they know what they're doing. And that is the system that Schottenheimer wants to put in place. He's not trying to sit there and say, hey guys, I want a goal out there. Let's get 5 quarterback pressures. He's like, no. We're not going to define ourselves by a goal. We're going to define ourselves by implementing a system that will help set us up to win, obviously in the short term, but in the medium and the long term as well. Again, systems over goals. Schottenheimer had that mentality the moment he showed up as a head coach for the Dallas Cowboys. I'm a fan of it. Now, will it result in a win on Sunday or wins in the long term or wins at all for Schottenheimer? I have no earthly idea. But I think the approach he's taking here is generally a good one. And I think we've seen coaches that take a goals-oriented approach. They can win a lot of football games. They can win games in the short term. Like Mike McCarthy's a great example of it. But you won't find a way to establish long-term success. And eventually, when the talent runs dry, things will collapse. We saw it under Mike McCarthy. We've seen that under numerous coaches. The systems-oriented coaches in the long run, like Sean McVay, for example, Bill Belichick, Andy Reid, Harbaugh with the Baltimore Ravens, Harbaugh with the Los Angeles Chargers, right? Those kind of coaches, those kinds of approaches, in the long term, those are the ones that work out. No guarantee Shawnee's will, but I think he's taking the right approach, implementing a systems process as opposed to a goals-oriented one. All right, next report here. Some good news on some defensive reinforcements. Per John Machota, he says Cowboys coach Brian Schottenheimer said defensive end Jadeveon Clowney and cornerback Deron Bland are trending towards playing Sunday. That is obviously a very good sign. He also went on to say, it was quoted by Machota here, he says, we're good enough to beat the Packers without CeeDee Lamb and Tyler Booker. And when he said this, there's a lot of people in the media are like, oh, what is he saying this for? Come on, like, are you really? And it's like, what's he supposed to say? Yeah, man, we're screwed. yeah, I don't even know why we're playing the game on Sunday. We might as well just forfeit now. Look, obviously, it's going to be a tough game. Obviously, the Cowboys are big underdogs, and deservedly so, based on how they've played and versus how Green Bay's played and some of the injuries and some really important positions. But you don't come out and say, like, yeah, we don't know how it's going to go, right? I always hate when coaches, and when they're in a tough situation, they're just like, listen, man, we're going to go out there and compete. We're just going to go out there and, do our job and execute. It just speaks to a mindset where they try and, I'll say this, they try and lower expectations in terms of they don't want to get attacked in the media. They don't want to get attacked by the fan base. If they go out and say, listen, man, we're just going to go out there and compete, and they end up losing by 20, they're like, hey, listen, I mean, it was close for a quarter or whatever. Schottenheimer's like, no, listen, we think we're good enough to win, right? Whether they do or not, that remains, of course, very much to be seen. But I like the approach here. A lot of people, especially when it comes to the Cowboys, especially when they're having a down year, like obviously we're only 3 games into it, but their defense certainly looks down, and now you have a lot of injuries. A lot of people are like, oh my goodness, like why even bother? We might as well just quit playing football altogether, right? And I think it's because people just, they watch too much ESPN and Fox Sports because they just talk about how much they hate the Cowboys all the time. And you need to turn that stuff off, guys. But I like Schottenheimer's approach here again. It's not anything sort of any arrogance. He's not guaranteeing a victory or anything like that. Not even remotely close. He's just saying, listen, I have confidence in me. I have confidence in our game plan. I have confidence in the guys we have. And I think a big part of that is it's true, right? Because you do have a good quarterback. You play good physical football, right? You're hoping to get a little bit better defensively. It's a tough matchup, but listen, you like your guys you have for a reason and believe in them. Again, it's one of those things that when you talk about being a coach and a leader of a team, you set the standard, right? You set the mentality for your team. Under Schottenheimer, what the Cowboys are wanting to be, Schottenheimer's goal is 3 things basically: crisp, physical, and buttoned up, right? And crisp, execute cleanly, avoid the mental mistakes, good on penalties, right? What we've seen, offense, yes, defense, not so much. Physical, both sides of the football, yes. Buttoned up, right? Handle yourself in a mature way, professional way, right? Avoid distractions where possible. I think that was one of the things why they like Kenny Clark versus Micah Parsons, which we'll get to in a little bit later. And I think those are the directions. Those are what Schottenheimer's trying to implement as a part of his system. And I think right now the Cowboys, with his leadership, are trending in that direction. This isn't arrogance from Schottenheimer. This is belief that he likes what he sees. We know it's going to be a tough game Sunday night. He knows it. I know it. Everybody knows it. But I think the fact that he's coming out and just sticking to who he is as a person, being authentic, will allow other players and the rest of the team to continue to buy into his system, even when things may not go well on game day. All right, next report here is courtesy of Nick Harris at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. He said Zion Childress has been signed to the Texans' active roster off of the Cowboys practice squad. Zion Childress, of course, one of the surprise of training camp, was considered basically a training camp body with very little chance to make the team, and ended up almost making the team until the Cowboys acquired Reddy Stewart and Bridges, and then he was waived and put on the practice squad and elevated with the injuries of the past couple weeks, and now he has been plucked off the practice squad by the Texans. For anyone who's unfamiliar, if you're on the practice squad, basically anyone can come pluck you at any time. It's basically like being a free agent. So the practice squad really doesn't protect the team very much, but it does keep the player on a football team as he works his way through the season, or just to get opportunities, whether it's through injury call-ups or through another team picking him up, like we saw here with Houston. And I think one of the things that's interesting, and we're rooting for Zion Childress, of course, we root for all these players, right? Former Cowboys or not, we want to see guys be successful. But I think one of the things that's interesting with Childress is he had a pretty good training camp and did a lot of good things, but the Cowboys just never felt he was as good as he needed to be. They felt Reddy Stewart as a nickel corner was just better. And through the 2 games that Stewart's had to play, he's been a pretty solid player. So it looks like the Cowboys got that one right. When you look at the safety position, the Cowboys believed in Wanye Thomas a lot more than they believed in Zion Childress, for example, right, in terms of being a backup player and a player that may have to fill in and play more reps going forward. And look, that's a decision they made. And if you look at those moves, I think Wanye Thomas, certainly in special teams, and maybe as a safety, and certainly Reddy Stewart as a nickel corner, they're probably just better. And that's nothing against Zion Childress. You, of course, root for him to have success going forward. But the reality is, it's a cliche, but, every team cuts good players. Every team cuts players they like. If Zion Childress was, really elite and really ready to step up, I think he would have played. He just wasn't better in practice and wasn't better in game plan prep than say Wanye Thomas, than say Reddy Stewart. And I think that's really important to understand. There are guys that do good things in training camp, but when they get into a week by week basis with game plans and strategies, their production or their performance just doesn't match what's needed. And we've seen that with starters, by the way. Kyrie Elam being a phenomenal example of that. Solid camp, terrible first 3 games of the regular season, right? Very interesting to see what the Cowboys do at corner going forward with Bland returning to the fold. But I think Zion Childress, great story, just wasn't quite good enough to crack in terms of getting some playing opportunities. And look, we'll see what he does with Houston. Wish him nothing but the best. All right, moving on here. This is per John Machota. Cowboys coach Brian Schottenheimer said there's nothing different about preparing for Micah Parsons coming to town this weekend. He says, look, it's just a normal week. Yeah, I think, again, it's the right approach, right? It's systems over goals, right? Just say, listen, this is our process. This is our system. We're just going to compete. We're just going to be physical. We're going to work on being crisp, and we're going to work on being buttoned up, right? Look, we're going to have our game plans. We're going to have our approaches, but that's the right mindset to take, right? Let the outside noise be the outside noise. He doesn't ignore it. He doesn't sit there and do the Bill Parcells, right? Calling T.O. the player. He's like, listen, I know Micah's good. I hope he doesn't get sacked. He's a great player. But he says, listen, it's just a normal week of game plan prep, preparing for another team's good players or bad players and their schemes and their strategies. And again, it is the systems over goals approach. Good to see it from Schottenheimer. Again, it's something we haven't seen in Dallas since at least the Bill Parcells era. All right, moving right along here. This is per Brandon Lohr. He said Cowboys running back Javonte Williams has gained 4.6 yards after contact per carry, the third most in the NFL with a minimum of 25 carries, and a number that would be the most by any Cowboys running back in the next-gen stats era per NFL Pro. Williams has been an absolute tank. Again, it's the mindset. It's what the Cowboys have been trying to become. They want to be a physical team. They want to be a crisp team. They want to be a buttoned-up team. We look at the crispness of Dak Prescott in the stat of the day. We're looking at the physical nature of Javonte Williams, right? This is what Schottenheimer has been trying to implement in an offense he has, right? For the most part, right? There's not been perfect. It never will be. But for a year one scheme with a completely new staff and a lot of new players and a lot of young players, they've done a pretty good job implementing the system with some good success. And I think that's one positive to certainly focus on. Need to figure out the defense. Obviously, that's been just a disaster, at least in pass defense up to this point. But if you're looking for positives and looking for things to really harp on, what Schottenheimer has done defensively has been really, offensively, what Schottenheimer has done for the offense has been really impressive. All right, and last report here, this is from Joseph Hoyt. He said, Kenny Clark doesn't mind being the, quote, forgotten man, unquote, in the lead up to Sunday's reunion with the Packers. He said, I'm going to prepare my butt off to get a win and kick butt on Sunday. As far as all that other stuff, I don't care about that. You know, one of the things I like about Kenny Clark versus Micah Parsons, and I think Micah Parsons is a better player, and I don't think that's very shocking to say that, right? I think Kenny Clark's a good player, and he's been one of actually the better performing Cowboys defenders. I think he's, top 3 in terms of the best Cowboys defenders through three weeks of the season, which isn't saying a whole lot because their secondary has been bad, their linebacking core has been bad, and the pass rush has been bad from the edge perspective. But he's come in and been as good as advertised, both in the run and against the pass, and as a leader too. So that's obviously outstanding to see. But you talk about Kenny Clark in terms of when I say buttoning up the organization, right? Micah Parsons was phenomenal, but he was a little bit of a distraction, right? Didn't have the podcast stuff that they talk about all the time. He had the theatrics on the sideline and things like that. And look, some of that was good. Some of that was just being feisty. Some of that was just being a competitor, and I get it. But some of it did get over the top. It did become a distraction where you would just see it all the time. And whether it was just from a fan's perspective or a player's perspective, it does eat away at you. And this is one of the problems with, for example, T.O. that he had in Dallas. Even though I don't think T.O. was as big a distraction with Dallas as he could have been based on what he's been in terms of prior years and prior teams, but it did become an issue. It always does. And that's one of those things where, listen, if you're trying to be a culture set, a culture shift, like get everything squared in the right way, if you're Schottenheimer, having a bunch of distractions can really be an impediment to it, even if it helps you win more games in the short term, right? It can really just deflate your opportunity to set up your system, right? Again, Micah Parsons, with all his distractions, if your goal is to win more games in the short term, he'll help you do that. But if your goal is to implement the system that will lead to sustained long-term success and hopefully eventually deep postseason runs and a more balanced roster, Kenny Clark is much more suited for that. So good job on Kenny Clark. Again, keeping things simple, right? Just being a football player. This is what I love about sort of that 2014 era Dallas Cowboys with Tony Romo, that magical season. That was a lot on the offensive line, but again, same kind of mentality where it's just, listen, you just go out there, play physical in the trenches, and do your job, and that should lead to success. Cowboys, again, doing that same sort of strategy here. It's good to see, and give credit to them for obviously making sure they make that deal. Kenny Clark coming into the fold, opening up the future, of course, with the cap space and the draft picks. But let's give credit to Kenny Clark as well, really stepping up, being exactly what the Cowboys were hoping he'd be. All right, let's get into the comments from yesterday as we get closer, of course, to game day. We'll get started, as we always do, with member comments. And members, I always greatly appreciate it. For anyone who is willing and able to become a member to support our channel, I highly recommend it, of course. And as a member, I will always shout out your comment. I'll always respond to every single member comments, every single episode, without fail. That is my promise to you. So without further ado, let's get into the member comments. This first one is from Robert Bass 3667. He commented, "Nick, really appreciate watching your show. Thank you." He said, "Some of the other YouTubers turn out they wanted to be celebrities more than bringing consistent good content." Yeah, I have seen that sometimes. I think it's just a weird social media phenomenon, right? You get 1,000 subscribers, 10,000 subscribers, 100,000 subscribers, and you think you're somebody, right? It's just one of those things. You get a few thousand followers on Twitter or X or whatever, and you just, oh my goodness, I must be really, really smart and it must be really, really important. Look, I mean, no one is bigger than the game. It's certainly not me, of course, and certainly not even players like on the Cowboys, for example. But no one is bigger than the game. No one is bigger than the team, and that's one of the things that I like to focus and harp on and comment on and say, it is always about the game. It is always about the team. That's always what it comes down to, now and forever. Certainly is never going to be about me. Certainly, even the players, to a certain extent, they're going to come and go, but it begins and ends with the game and the team. And I think that should always be the focus, and at least that's what I try to keep as the focus. But Robert goes on to say, "My thought is on the Packers this Sunday night. What are we, 101 chance to winning? Just kidding, but this is the NFL. Anything can happen, and we are in the midst of a defensive shakeup. I wish I could say we will be 2-2 after Sunday, but I hope we make a game out of it that is entertaining and not blow out. Your thoughts?" It's one of those things where there's everything in my gut is telling me, boy, this should be a blowout for the Packers to blow out Dallas. It just, in terms of what Green Bay, in terms of just gut feeling, right? You're looking at Packers are better, right? Cowboys going through a lot of shakeups and a lot of changes, just trying to figure out personnel and scheme and strategy on defense. Whereas the Packers, they kind of know who they are already, right? They're a team that's set to win now. They are in 100%. They have to win either in 2025 or 2026. The Cowboys have said, we're punting to 2026, 2027, 2028, right? So total different in terms of shifts, in terms of what the goal is of the franchises, in terms of a macro level. Obviously, both teams are trying to win Sunday night. It's hard for me to think of a world where Dallas wins this game. They certainly could, right? It's the NFL, right? It's not like they're, it's not like a D3 school against Alabama or anything like that. I just think the Packers are just better, and this is going to be a big Schottenheimer game and a big Eberflus game. It's going to come down to coaching and strategy and execution and implementing some good plans. And I'm curious to see how it goes out. Now, to be fair, right, I did have the same feeling when Dallas defeated Tampa last year and defeated Washington in Washington last year. I was like, how did Dallas do that? But I also had the same feeling before the two Philadelphia games where Dallas got waxed. So it's the NFL, right? You never know. But I agree with you. What I want to see is a good game plan, good execution, and just improvement, mainly on defense. I want to see the offense still be physical and be crisp, but I want to see some improvement on defense. That's really what I want to see. And look, we'll let the chips fall where they may as in terms of the result of the game Sunday night. All right, this next comment is from David Dobbins, 5887. He said, regarding the comment countering your take on plans of a team build versus Parsons trade, it's both. After the Green Bay playoff game, they obviously let 2024 die on the vine, almost a talent reset, but oddly, then they paid through the nose for an aging Dak and also for CD. They tried again with 40 to Micah. The team tries to build, but overpaying players is like crack to them. We're going to suck this year, injuries and talent, new schemes. If we had let Dak go instead of the contract, trading CD instead of the contract, then this crap year we already could have had us here with tons of new players via the trade picks and the $90 million saved. This team isn't good enough to coddle itself with expensive stars. They come after, and also hopefully in the draft, also drafting safeties and corners in the next draft or ever. No, acquire, absolutely, but always draft best player available, period. Well, I mean, listen, CeeDee Lamb's a star, and he's a great player, and Dak Prescott's been playing good football. One of the caveats I will always throw out there is that you never want to jump out of the frying pan and into the fire with the quarterback position, right? You look at the Dallas Cowboys are a great example of this, right? From the era of the late 1990s, from when Troy Aikman retired until basically Bill Parcells showed up, right, in 2003, and even then, basically until Tony Romo in 2006, right? There was just, what are we doing at quarterback for from the year 2000 to 2005, essentially that 6-year run, which is pretty short by NFL historical standards. There's teams that go through this issue for decades. Look at Cleveland, look at Washington, right? There are teams that just go through it at the quarterback position. Look at the Giants, and Eli Manning retired, right? And it just became, you just run yourself in circles. As you can draft incredibly well. Let me pick on the Giants here for a second. They have a great front four. They crushed it in the draft there. You look at Malik Neighbors, a guy they drafted. They absolutely crushed it. Saquon Barkley was a star they drafted many years ago. They drafted Xavier McKinney, right? They ended up letting these people walk. They couldn't re-sign them just because they kept trying to do different things and figure out what they could do at the quarterback position long term, and they never could get it right in terms of marrying quarterback with scheme, with roster, with franchise. They just couldn't figure it out, and they just spun their wheels in place for so many years. We'll see what happens going forward with New York. You look at Cleveland was another good example of this. There's a lot of teams that have fallen under that model. But one of the things that can happen if you're just stable at quarterback is you can find other areas to improve your team. You can implement a system, right? Schottenheimer right now, imagine if he was trying to work with Joe Milton, and as an example, and just rolling with the punches there. Would you be able to just really effectively implement what you wanted from a culture perspective? No, because you've got a quarterback that you're just trying to, keep on the rails here. So I know a lot of people sit there and say, listen, Dak is not elite. I think he's good, not great, even though he's had a very good start to the season. I think that's fair. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I do think people that sit there and say, listen, they should have just dumped everybody. Why did they pay Dak all that money? Why did they pay CeeDee Lamb all that money? Listen, you need some stability. You need some players. They got a lot of cap space. They got some good players. They've got a lot of draft picks. It hasn't been perfect. I'm not saying their roster team management has been outstanding. But even if you're trying to retool and build towards the future, you don't let good players, certainly not star players, certainly not quality quarterbacks, just walk out the door, right? Bad things happen when you do that. And I think a lot of people look at the Dallas Cowboys and sit there and say, well, they're not going to be any good anyway, right? Why do we even have all this money for Dak Prescott? Because even if they're not going to be very good, you need to have quarterback answered. If the Cowboys didn't have quarterback answered, you know what they'd be right now? The New Orleans Saints. Right, the New Orleans Saints, they're still trying to figure out some cap issues, but they obviously were a bad team last year, moved off of Derek Carr. They've got a young, exciting offensive coach, a new coach, trying to figure out a lot of things. They've got no path forward. They got Spencer Rattler, who's okay, nothing special. They got second-round quarterback Tyler Shuck, we don't really know what they have there, and they're just kind of spinning their wheels, right? We don't know what the Saints are going to be. They have no real plan. They have no real path because they may have to go draft a quarterback in the first round again next year, and then maybe 3 years later after that with a new head coach. The Dallas Cowboys, they have at least the quarterback position locked down with some stability. That matters. The Kansas City Chiefs, Andy Reid, they had that locked down. They had stability. When Mahomes came along, they were ready to explode, but they were winning football games with Alex Smith well before Mahomes came along. The Philadelphia Eagles, right, before they got Jalen Hurts, they had Carson Wentz. They had some stability there, even though Carson Wentz had some issues during his last part of his tenure with Philadelphia. You need stability at the quarterback position first and foremost. If you don't have that, everything else will fall apart. I know a lot of people are critical of Dak, but you really, really need that stability. Otherwise, every other plan you have, roster building, retooling, tanking, drafting, whatever it may be, none of it will work. You have to have stability at quarterback first and foremost. All right. Next comment here is from Jamal Haltom, 5712. What do you think about watching games with no volume? I find it much easier to block out the influence of the soap opera-oriented broadcast view. It removes the emotion and allows one to accept what you're seeing. Yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting is if you go back, I guess a couple decades ago now, even when it was, Monday Night Football with Al Michaels and John Madden, and then when they moved to Sunday night, it was just a different kind of game in terms of how it was called, in terms of, just the more calm demeanor. There wasn't so much of these storylines and this crazy energy from these announcers and things like that. I think a lot of people, I'll give you an example. So when Al Michaels, I think, got a lot of criticism because there was one Thursday night game last year, the year before, where it was a game-winning play with like 5 seconds to go. It was an incredible play, and he just kept a calm, cool demeanor during the entire play call. And people were like, oh, Al Michaels, is he falling asleep at the wheel? Where's the energy? I'm like, that's how games used to be called, and that's how they should be called. The game and the energy of the game should speak for itself. Pat Summerall, the legendary play-by-play man, was very good at this, right? The great play-by-play guys, They let the energy speak for itself. They let the play speak for itself. And that's why I think there are some broadcast crews. And listen, I think Fox is horrifically bad at this, right? Whether it's the Greg Olson crew or whether it's the Tom Brady crew. And look, they both are some good crews. They're entertaining games, but you get, like you said, caught up in just what they're trying to create with the emotion and the drama and things like that, and the soap opera, like you're alluding to, and it does sort of take away from the performance on the field. I think there are some crews that are really, really good. I think, honestly, I know a lot of people don't like Chris Collinsworth and Tirico at Sunday Night Football. I think they do a decent job. Joe Buck and Troy Aikman on Monday night, they do a decent job. They're probably the two best crews, if we're being honest. A lot of these other groups are it's just crazy over the top, and I agree with you. It can be hard to watch and hard to listen to because it's just such a it's like the worst of like a Homer college broadcast where like there's a college, like the local college radio team or whatever, like that, where they're incredibly energetic and heavily one-sided. You get that same kind of vibe with a lot of TV crews today where it's a lot less professional, a lot less, we're going to let the game speak for itself. I agree with you. There's a lot of crews here where it's better just to turn off the audio and just listen to the game as the broadcast without any sound. All right, let's get into some other comments here. All right, this first one here is from Craig Beal X71. He said bench Dante Fowler and Mozzie Smith, or Shamar James, and replace Kenneth Murray with safety Donovan Wilson would be awesome. Jadeveon Clowney and Deron Bland would be an upgrade. I think what you're saying is bench Dante Fowler and Mozzie Smith, play Shamar James to replace Kenneth Murray. And then, or put Donovan Wilson in the box too to replace Kenneth Murray. Or I don't get exactly what you're saying there. I guess what I'm trying to read here between the lines, you're trying to say bench Fowler and Mozzie Smith, play Shamar James, and replace Kenneth Murray with Donovan Wilson. In terms of not being a strong safety, be a box kind of player, and then Jadeveon and Clowney and Deron Bland coming into the fold would be an upgrade. You know, I do think we're going to have to see, I mentioned yesterday, I think Dante Fowler's about to get benched, maybe even cut, right? And you see the writing on the wall. He's performed poorly on a production basis. He's performed poorly on an analytics basis. He's performed poorly on the eye test, right? And when you perform poorly in all three of those elements on a defense that's playing poorly and you're supposed to be a key part of it, that's not a good sign for your duration. We talked about it yesterday, Jadeveon Clowney getting more reps, getting more opportunities. I don't think Dante Fowler will get cut like this week. But I think he's going to get a lot less playing time, and I think we're going to see within a few weeks he's going to get benched and potentially cut, because unless he starts stepping up big time, because what we've seen from Fowler is just not nearly enough. I agree that 100%. Getting Shamar James more playing time, you know, you don't want to insert too many variables too early, but he's definitely a linebacker I was a huge fan of in the preseason. I think he's got a bright future. I think I got to look at something with this linebacking core, and I think this is where I think Schottenheimer needs to really kind of, you know, nudge Eberflus a little bit. Says, listen, man, I mean, how bad are the young linebackers if they're worse than what we're seeing on Sundays? And maybe the answer is, listen, they're pretty bad. They're not there mentally yet, not even remotely close, right? They'd actually be worse than Murray and Sanborn, which maybe they would be. There definitely needs to be a plan to figure out how to get better at that position. Obviously, we know Overshown is returning at some point, but the reality is they've been so bad at linebacker where maybe mixing it up and throwing some young guys in, maybe adding some playmaking could help out this defense. I mean, who knows? It's certainly, at a certain point, it couldn't hurt. Let's see here. This is from Chris Joldum. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. He said, cornerback lineup for Packers game, assuming Bland plays on a pitch count. Diggs and Bland on the outside plus Stewart at nickel. I don't see a viable option on the outside that will allow Bland to play nickel, which is his best position. And that's not going to change anytime soon. Yes, the cavalry, Revel, Butler, Carson, et al. Is arriving soon, but none have much NFL level game experience to rely on. Time for a serious search for a veteran starting outside cornerback, even if it's a one-season rental. Well, I mean, it's one of those things, unless you want to develop Revel, right? And there's been a lot of buzz in the Cowboys camp about they want to give Revel some opportunities. If you ask the Cowboys front office and ask them to be brutally honest and told them, what is your dream starting three based on the Cowboys roster? I wonder if they would say, listen, we expect Diggs and Revel on the outside and Deron Bland on the inside, with Elam being a backup outside corner, right? That's sort of what we're looking for in terms of a structure. Elam being a backup in one corner, Butler being a backup on another corner on the outside, right? I think that would be sort of their, and maybe I guess at this point, Reddy Stewart would be the backup nickel, right? And I think that would be sort of their dream ideal situation. And look, I mean, if Revel can develop and be good, that's a pretty good group. I mean, that's not a bad group, all things considering. Remember, Revel was a first-round talent with the injury, so you would have Diggs, who's played poorly, I get it, but you could have Bland, who's been playing well, and you have Revel on the outside, a young corner. That's not a bad group.
Do you bring in a 1-year rental to potentially stunt Revel's development? I don't know. It's one of those things that's so tough. If you're in win now mode, definitely, right? If you were the Green Bay Packers, for example, definitely do it. But I think right now, listen, you're trying to develop Revel, right? It's different than Jadeveon Clowney deal because they brought in Dante Fowler. This is my opinion here. The Cowboys haven't said this yet, to be sort of the veteran leader, the key presence they can rely on, and he hasn't been that at all. So I think they're replacing Fowler or are going to eventually with Clowney. Right now, the Cowboys, they have young corners. They're waiting to see how they do, right? And they haven't had a chance to see Revel yet, and they don't want to stunt his development. I don't think they're bringing in Clowney, for example, to replace Ezraku, to take Ezraku reps away because they want to keep developing that young defensive end from their perspective. I think right now, bringing in a veteran corner, all that would do is potentially stunt the growth and take opportunities away from Revel, which I think is more important for Revel to obviously get healthy, but get some opportunities as he works and develops, gets his feet underneath him, and hopefully becomes a good corner for the Dallas Cowboys. All right, let's see here. This is kind of a funny comment on how that this is from Jared Grimes 5532. He commented, "I can't believe that Dante Fowler has been an absolute no-show this season." Yeah, it's been probably the biggest disappointment. I know a lot of people look at the cornerback and safety position, and look, I get it, but Diggs has given up big plays before. Donovan Wilson has never been known as an elite cover safety, and listen, Elam did not play well with Buffalo, and they've had injuries and a new scheme. But the biggest disappointment to me is Dante Fowler, who's been multiple seasons now a good solid pass rusher and good solid defensive end, and he's been absolutely a no-show for all 3 games, like combined. So it's been very poor from his perspective. But anyway, this is the response to that comment I thought was pretty funny. This is from Frey and Besa. He responded, "He's a spy for the Commanders," which is it's just pretty funny. Pretty funny, spying for Dan Quinn. I think that's a humorous. Made me chuckle there. This is from Bobby Williams-WAT. He said, "You can give Jerry the Eagles' complete team. He would find a way to destroy it in so many ways. This has been the problem and always will be." Listen, I mean, if you just blame Jerry Jones for everything, I mean, you can. If that makes you happy, if that brings you joy in life, sure, by all means, right? If listen, Jerry Jones has his flaws. He's obviously, of course. But listen, you can't, if you're looking to just find a pattern for the Cowboys to improve and play better football, just sitting there and blaming Jerry Jones after every poor performance it's just not very smart, right? The Philadelphia Eagles, since Jerry Jones became the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, have 2 Super Bowl champions, right? They've played really good football, undeniably so. A lot of credit is due to Philadelphia as an organization. But Jerry Jones has 3 titles, right? I mean, if you just look at pure Super Bowls since Jerry Jones became the owner, there's only one owner that has more championships than Jerry Jones during that same time period, right? 1989. And that, of course, right now is the New England Patriots with Bob Kraft. We'll see what happens with the Chiefs. Of course, they could certainly maybe surpass. Obviously, they got the 2 victories over San Francisco and 1 victory over Philly right now under the Chiefs' belt. Patrick Mahomes, Kansas City, maybe they can be the second team to pass Jerry Jones in terms of getting more than 3 championships. But I think we look at where Jerry Jones is now. There's a lot of hate on Jones, and deservedly so. But strictly from a high-level perspective, how many other teams have won Super Bowls since Jerry Jones became the owner of the Dallas Cowboys and de facto GM? Seriously, how many? Like, how many have won more than 1? We talk about how great and smart the Lions are the past half decade or so, and they've been phenomenal. They haven't made it to a Super Bowl, right? We look across the board, and we look at, pick any franchise that you really like. The Pittsburgh Steelers, so incredibly buttoned up. They've done a phenomenal job from an organizational standpoint for a very long time. 2 titles. The Green Bay Packers, they struck gold. They went from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love. 2 titles, right? As much as there's hate on Jerry Jones, as there should be with a lot of what he does, if you're just looking at it from a title perspective, there's very few that have been better. And there is a good argument to be made if you're just focused on titles. And I'm not one of those guys that's hyper-focused on titles. There's a lot of people out there that are focused on championships and championships exclusively. If that's what you're focused on, there is one owner and one organization that's been better than the Cowboys since Jerry Jones bought the team. 1 out of 32. Right, obviously, since when they bought the team, there weren't the Texans or the Panthers or the Jaguars, so you can back that up a little bit if you want. But still, one ownership group, one owner that's been better. If you're focused on rings only, you can blame Jerry Jones all you want, and I get it. He deserves a lot of it. Right, he's made a lot of dumb decisions, and a lot of what he says I'm not a fan of particularly. But if you're just focused on championships, which a lot of people are, I want championships. That's the only thing that matters. Championships, winning Super Bowls, it's all that matters. There's only one owner that's better since he took over. One. and one that's tied with him. 29 owners wish they had as many championships as Jerry Jones. Think about that for a second. All right, let's go to maybe one more comment here. This is from Anchors Away 9893. He said, I do not think that we are that far away from a championship team. We definitely need a headhunter at linebacker, Overshown if healthy. We need to add some talent at safety for sure. I still think we can be in the hunt for a wild card spot. Parsons' move was a great move. If Parsons gets a couple sacks this Sunday, that is what he's expected to do. But if he gets no sacks and the Cowboys grind out a win, obviously a huge win for Dallas. Put in parentheses, not likely. You know what's very interesting is that there's this sort of expectation, and it probably will happen, to be honest, just because Parsons is pretty good in these spots, that Parsons will go out there and get 3 sacks and just humiliate the Cowboys. And I think there's a good chance he will, considering the Cowboys' tackle position is the best. But it's one of those things that would be I'd actually be interested in a storyline, even if the Packers win. But if Parsons, has a few pressures and maybe only gets half a sack or gets no sacks or something like that, I'd be very curious to see what the media headline is, right? If Parsons does very little, even if the Packers win and win decisively, what is the attention, right? What is the focus, right? Because a lot of people would be hypercritical of Parsons. If the roles were reversed and he was with the Cowboys and he came out and didn't have a dominant game, they'd say, what's wrong with Parsons, right? But if the Packers win and win decisively and Micah Parsons isn't productive, I wonder if there's going to be that kind of media attention on the young edge rusher. I would bet not, because obviously we're dealing with any team covering the Dallas Cowboys and the biases that occur with that. All right, I think that's all the time I have for comments today. Look, keep them coming, a lot of good comments. We're going to see some changes, right? We're getting some healthy people back. Deron Bland returning to the fold. Clowney, getting closer to playing. This is obviously a defense that's getting some horses back, which of course is a big help. Offense on the other side, down a bunch of guys. So there's, there's the injury bug. Giveth, the injury bug taketh away. It's just the way it works in the National Football League. Need a better defensive performance and need a big Schottenheimer, big coaching staff game. We'll follow to see what the Cowboys do as they get closer to Sunday night. And until tomorrow, I'm Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection.